Svalbard is an incredible destination, but is so remote it can be intimidating. Sure, you can go on an incredibly expensive cruise or go with a tour company, but it's not only possible, but incredibly enjoyable to do it on your own. So here's everything you need to know to book the trip of a lifetime to the northernmost destination in the world. Let's rapid fire through things you may have heard about Svalbard. Are there more polar bears than people? It's a bit more nuanced depending on the boundaries of the area you're looking at. In town, there's more people than bears, and further out, there's more bears than people. You can't leave town without a rifle. Mostly true. The town of Longyearbyen is deemed safe, but signs at the edge of town act as do not cross warning lines. The airport and global seed vault are outside of the perimeter. How do you find a polar bear? You don't. They can smell you from up to 20 miles away. In Svalbard, polar bear finds you. Polar bear attacks are very real, so you or someone you are with needs to be prepared. This may just include a flare gun or flashbangs, but a rifle of at least .308 caliber is recommended by the governor. Don't worry, you won't be required to do any of the shooting yourself. But this means that Svalbard has the highest number of firearms per capita in the world. It also has the largest number of snowmobiles per capita. In fact, there's more snowmobiles than people. You're not allowed to die in Svalbard. Well, you can, you just won't be buried. The cemetery closed because bodies were buried in the permafrost, and they, and what killed them, didn't decay, including strains of the 1918 Spanish flu. Not great. By the same logic, you aren't allowed to give birth either. Take your shoes off. A tradition dating back to the coal mining days. Every hotel, museum, and many restaurants and shops ask that you remove your shoes before entering. If you've been to Japan, you'll feel right at home. Svalbard has the most northern insert item here. Church, post office, brewery, hell, even sushi restaurant. It's inhabited by people from over 40 countries. You don't need a work visa, and any member of the Svalbard Treaty can operate mines, hunt, or conduct research, just under the overall management of Norway. There's lots of people from Russia, Ukraine, and Thailand, for example. No food is grown in Svalbard, so everything needs to be brought in by boat or plane from the mainland. There's no trees either, and only tiny patches of flowers. It's illegal to remove anything historical. Combined with the Arctic frost, things are very well preserved. As an example, this wooden boat had been beached for over 100 years, and nobody is allowed to move it. By contrast, both Longyearbyen and Bartensberg are fairly new construction, as both were nearly completely destroyed by fire from the Tirpitz and Scharnhorst during World War II in Operation Zitronella. So there's three main ways of visiting Svalbard. You can come on a cruise ship, you can go on a guided multi-day expedition tour, or you can go on your own. There's definitely pros and cons to each, but as a solo traveler watching my budget, I was here on my own. When should you visit? Well, Svalbard has 3 seasons. Polar summer runs from May through September, where the sun never sets. Polar night, rebranded to Northern Lights winter, is the opposite between October and February, where the sun never rises. Finally, there's sunny winter from March through May, where it's still cold out, but you have both day and night. Of course, what you see and the activities you can do are gonna vary wildly. You can't ride on a snowmobile under the northern lights when there's no snow and the sun never sets. But I'll talk more about activities in a bit. I went during polar summer, which is also the most popular season. I've talked about how to fly to Svalbard here, but in short, you just book a ticket like any other destination. After arriving in Longyearbyen, just walk outside and take the bus to your hotel. Different buses go to different hotels, and you can save a bit by buying a round-trip ticket. To return to the airport, bus departures are tied to flight times and are published online and in hotels. Hotels in Svalbard, due to limited supply, can get very expensive, and for the most part, they aren't that luxurious. But remember for a minute where you are. So, what can you do on a trip to Svalbard and how do you book it? Well, unlike in the Galapagos, I recommend that you do book as much as possible ahead of time because things do sell out. There's a host of different tour operators that you can go with. Fortunately, the vast majority of them can all be booked on a single site, Visit Svalbard.com and you can see real-time availability. This is the official tourism authority and they don't have an angle here. A few things, like the specific dog kennel I went to, had a separate booking site. I'm going to divide things to do into 3 broad categories. The first are attractions. You can tour an old coal mine, visit the brewery, the Global Seed Vault. There's 2 museums in town, the North Pole Expedition Museum and the Svalbard Museum. Next up is what I'll call transportation. Depending on the season, you can hike, kayak, bike, ATV, dog sled, dog wagon, dog buggy, or snowmobile. Finally, there's the wildlife boat trips. These only operate during the summer and adjacent months, usually from May through October. The boats themselves range from open rib boats to closed rib boats to hybrid electric boats with a bar, and the costs scale accordingly. While you never know exactly what you're going to see, there's trips focusing on glaciers, puffins or other birds, walruses, or trips to Ny-Ålesund, the northernmost settlement in the world. Before the war in Ukraine, trips to the Russian town of Pyramidin were also very common. Now, due to sanctions, most tour operators no longer stop. A few still do, and I leave it up to you if you want to support that. So the million-dollar question. I was in Svalbard for 5 days in July 2023. Did I see a polar bear? Well, yes, of course. Did I see one that was alive? No. Was the trip still worth it? Absolutely. I saw and did all sorts of amazing things, from seeing walruses up close, to an Arctic fox with a bird in its mouth, to driving a buggy pulled by huskies, and kayaking next to a glacier. According to several guides, you have about a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a polar bear on any given boat trip out of Longyearbyen, while taking the year as a whole. But each of them had crazy polar bear stories, from scaring them off while camped, to a polar bear boarding the very boat I had been on and then refusing to leave. If you want to have the absolutely best chance to see them, go early in the season on one of the multi-day expeditions that goes all the way up to the Arctic ice sheet. Those easily cost $7,000 to $12,000 per person, so I'll guess I'll do that on another trip. So that's how you visit Svalbard on your own. It's unlike any other place on Earth, and despite the remoteness, it's definitely worth a visit.